Hello and welcome to The World Today on Channels Television. I'm Cynthia Araya. Here are our top stories at this hour. Now, there might be an ongoing crisis in eastern Ukraine, but that hasn't stopped officials in the country from setting conditions for receiving Russian aid in the east after a huge convoy of food and medicine set off from outside of Moscow. The Security Council spokesman insists that aid should pass through a government-controlled border post and be accompanied by Red Cross officials. However, there are Western concerns that Russia is using humanitarian assistance as a pretext to invade eastern Ukraine. At least 1,500 people have died since Ukraine sent troops against pro-Russia rebels. The fighting in Donetsk and Luhansk regions since mid-April has displaced hundreds of thousands of people, many of whom fled to Russia. Now, the U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry believes that the only way Iraq's leaders can regain the confidence of its citizens is by having an inclusive government. The United States has supported the end of current Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki's 8-year rule, even as Maliki shows no sign of relinquishing power, and it has blamed Maliki for failing to force consensus and fueling sectarian violence that is breaking Iraq apart. Kerry ruled out U.S. combat troops on the ground, but promised Iraq as much assistance as it needs.
Iraqi leadership has a very difficult challenge. It has to regain the confidence of its citizens by governing inclusively, but also by taking steps to demonstrate their resolve. And we're going to continue to stand with the Iraqi people during this time of transition. But I will tell you that without any question, we are prepared to consider additional political, economic, and security options as Iraq starts to build a new government, and very much calculated to try to help stabilize the security situation, to expand economic development, and to strengthen the democratic institutions.
The U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry. Now, in spite of U.S. airstrikes targeting IS, formerly known as ISIS, the United Nations has warned that several thousand civilians are still trapped by militants on a mountain in northern Iraq and need life-saving assistance. Members of the Yazidi sect fled there 10 days ago after fighters from the Islamic State seized the town of Sinjar. The U.S. has been conducting airstrikes to help stem the rapid advance in the north of the country. Now, as you heard in the last story, Iraq's president has asked MP Haider al-Abadi to form a new cabinet snubbing the incumbent Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki. Mr. Abadi's appointment came after months of political fighting, which analysts say is partially to blame for Iraq's inability to effectively fight the threat of IS. Now, you will recall yesterday that we told you about the teenager who was murdered in Missouri. And now today we're going to listen to what the aggrieved family members are saying about the incident. They are calling for justice for their son. The incident is one which has caused major uproar in the suburb of Ferguson, where a group gathered at a burned-out convenience store, throwing rocks at police and also firing guns. The U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder reacted to the situation, saying the case was one which deserved nothing short of a fulsome review. For now, let's listen to the reactions from the family of the deceased.
It was funny, silly, it could make you laugh. Any problems that would be going on or any situation, there wasn't nothing that he couldn't solve. He'd bring people back together. He's a good boy. He didn't deserve none of this. None of it. We need justice for our son. Yes. We need justice for our son.
Yeah, you know,
we don't know.
The witnesses have come forward and said it did not happen as the police said it happened, and that you only got their version of what happened, not the witnesses' version that happened. And thanks to the NAACP and others, they are helping secure those witnesses to turn over to the Justice Department. And we think it will be very clear when all this is over what really happened and how this child was executed.
That's my firstborn son. anybody that know me knew how I felt about my son. I just wish I could have been there to help him. Anything. He didn't deserve that.
And when we come back on The World today, the World Health Organization concludes that untested drugs can be used on patients that are suffering from the Ebola virus. We'll have details for you shortly. Please stay with us. Welcome back. You're also watching The World Today on Channels Television. Let's find out what's happening now on the African continent, and we start right here in Nigeria. Now, commercial drivers have been directed to demand for medical reports from sick passengers before conveying them to their destinations. This is part of efforts at containing the spread of the Ebola virus disease, according to the Minister of Health, Professor Onyebuchi Chukwu. Now, road transport owners have also been advised to seek for a certificate of waiver for corpses before transporting them from one part of the country to another. The minister handed down these directives at a meeting with road transport owners in the nation's capital, Abuja. Now, still talking about the Ebola virus, based on the intensity of the spread of the virus in some West African countries, the World Health Organization has concluded that untested drugs can be used to treat patients infected with the virus. The WHO deems the step ethical in light of the scale of the outbreak and high number of deaths. The statement was made after its medical experts met in Switzerland yesterday to discuss the issue. But officials have warned that there were very limited supplies of potential treatments. But let's look at how things are going now in one of the few clinics in which Ebola victims are being treated in Liberia.
A clinic treating Ebola-infected patients in Liberia is in urgent need of aid from the international community. Foya, the sole Ebola clinic operating at the heart of the Ebola outbreak, is in northern Liberia, close to the borders with Sierra Leone and Guinea. Patients from all the three countries come to the clinic for medical treatment. The outbreak began in Guinea and spread to Liberia, Sierra Leone and Nigeria, and has seen a total of 1,779 cases, including 961 deaths, according to the latest WHO update.
From yesterday's report, we had one Q who was positive, and now the result shows negative. And we have 5 that was admitted, but they had negative results, so we discharged them. We had 3 deaths, the one that died previously in an ambulance, and we had 2 deaths, 1 confirmed and 1 suspected.
There is no cure for Ebola. Medical teams provide supporting treatment to increase survival rates, which without treatment can be as low as 10%. But space here is running out. There is frantic building work underway to make more room for the patients. More help, especially more healthcare staff, is needed. Local health officials hope international funding will soon materialize.
I think the epidemic is falling in a health system which is not strong enough. And you look at the identification of the cases, the whole surveillance is not very strong enough. The system in terms of the supplies, logistical component of it is also weak. Probably that also explains the high exposure to the health workers.
Ebola's initial flu-like symptoms can lead to external hemorrhaging from areas like eyes and gums and internal bleeding, which can lead to organ failure. Patients have a better chance of survival if they receive early treatment.
Local health officials hope pledged into.
In other news, according to the Human Rights Watch, the killings of at least 817 people by Egyptian security forces last year probably amount to a crime against humanity. A report by the US-based group says 1,000 or more people probably died in one day around Rabba al-Adawiya Mosque. The deaths came during demonstrations broken up by Egyptian security forces. And the executive director, Kenneth Roth, said the deaths were one of the world's largest killings of demonstrators in a single day in recent history. Mr. Roth and a colleague were stopped from entering Egypt. They were due to launch the new report at a press conference in the Egyptian capital, but were deported after being held for 12 hours at Cairo's international airport. The group's year-long investigation focused on 6 demonstrations in July and August 2013 that were forcefully broken up by security forces then under the command of now President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. Mr. Sisi, who was then a general running Egypt's military and was elected head of state in May 2014, oversaw the ousting of President Mohamed Morsi in July 2013. In the aftermath, his armed forces launched a brutal crackdown on Muslim Brotherhood supporters. Now, despite the tension in South Sudan, many people are making a change, or at least doing their part to contribute to change. In this next report, a group of performers put on a show in a local market in Juba, South Sudan, and they have one message, which is to promote the education of girls.
Titled Education for the People, Grasp It. The play explores the difficulties girls face in the country, addressing issues like education, domestic violence, and early marriage. Lack of education for girls is just one of the many issues facing Africa's youngest country. After months of ongoing conflict, South Sudan is on the brink of humanitarian catastrophe. A famine looms.
We went to the market, make a research, asking about what that they have in their community. Don't let the girl go to school and what. When we get all this research and then we come and sit down, we're starting scripting our play.